Sometimes I think we beat our head trying to break through the glass instead of just going around the glass.
It would have been nice to have known my dad a little bit better before he passed.
Strong men have come out from a family that didn't have a male role model. If a CEO of a company wants to be successful, they know that they have to recruit talent.
The trend tends to be the person who spends the most money gets elected.
I'm okay with that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Melding Minds. I am your host, Clarence Abercrombie, and today I'm joined by Chris Williams, husband, father, and IT professional. So Chris, tell me a little bit about what it's like being all three of those things.
Probably the most challenging one is like being a father. Having the responsibility to raise, teach, empower young people is a huge responsibility. So that's probably the most challenging one. The next one is being a husband. My wife and I have been married for 10 years now, but we've started dating like in 1998. So we've known each other a long time, but being a husband is definitely has its challenges. To be the leader of a family, to make decisions, but also know that you need to lean on somebody. And I think being a husband is also challenging because you have different opinions about life, and you have to learn to work well together because also you're incorporating your children into that. So the IT professional thing, I think that's icing on the cake. But father number one, having responsibility, husband number two, and then being a professional, I think that's pretty easy.
So you mentioned that learning to lean on somebody. Was that difficult?
Was difficult, is difficult, and probably will remain difficult. I think you want to just like feel like you have all the answers and you don't need anybody to protect you or to cover down on you. But I think doing that doesn't allow your spouse or your partner to do their role and to support you, right? So I think letting yourself go to have someone support you is something that I think most people struggle with because you don't want to feel like you're helpless, like you don't need anyone's help. But it's a challenge to just let yourself be vulnerable to allow people to help you.
Is your wife, is she a stay-at-home mom or does she work?
She's currently working. She's done the stay-at-home mom thing several times in support of my professional adventures, but I don't think it's her forte. She's a great person at it, but I think she prefers to work and have her social being and self-worth being working. I think she enjoys being a social worker and providing back to the community.
It's important work.
It is. Probably underpaid, undervalued, but when you think about an individual whose responsibility is to like breathe that social fabric, I think it's important in our society and a profession that probably gets overlooked when you have people who will go out and help society be better by whether that's providing mental health, providing housing, providing health care. That individual who knows to find those resources to help the community is very important.
Chris, you're a pretty accomplished man.
Yep.
What was your childhood like? How did the world create you?
The world created me. It wasn't as like cookie cutter, straight out of like Dennis the Menace or somebody like that, right? My mom and dad got divorced when I was a super young person, so I didn't have any like repercussions from that because I was too young to understand. But growing up with a mother who was hardworking and dedicated definitely created who I am today as far as like work ethic. But the extended family also helped as well. Like my mother is a child of a family of 12. And so, right. I want to say 10 of the 11 siblings all lived in the same city. So my extended family within my city was like huge. So I had older cousins who went out and did things before me. So that gave me some examples of good things to do and also gave me some examples of not good things to do. So I want to say that my extended family really shaped who I was as an individual. Definitely props to my older brother who is 6 years older than me. And so that also shaped me because, again, I had someone to look up to and to carve out the things that were good to repeat, and also someone who went before me and faced some life challenges and kind of told me what to avoid.
A lot of people talk about having a, mother in the home who had to hold it down basically on her own, instilling those values. But me, myself, my father was not around. I didn't really have a relationship with him. Did you have a relationship with your father?
My relationship with my dad was on and off. I think I developed some animosity towards him, and that probably was just poor handling of my mother's emotions about what had happened. And so she had an opinion about him, right? And just through osmosis, I developed opinion about him that didn't necessarily reflect our relationship. And so it took for me to get older to understand that I had to find and form my own sense of who he was and how he was important to me. And currently today, my dad is one of my best people I talk to. The amount of influence and advice that he's given me has definitely helped. And so I lean on that for that time period. It was best that he wasn't in my life, not because of something that he accomplished or something that he did, or just the way God had aligned it. So we was able to, after I left home and graduated college, to really build a bond and form an alliance with one another.
I never got there. I met my dad once when I was 9 years old, and we tried to stay in contact via letters, but they just kind of died out. And then he reached out again right before he passed away, and because I didn't have a relationship with him, I was kind of resistant to his his attempts to reach out. And then, later ended up regretting it. So it's good that you guys have been able to reconnect.
Right. When I was younger, like he used to say things like, it's two cans on the end of that string. And I was too young to understand what he was saying, but he was saying like, it goes both ways. Like he can't be the only one reaching out, that if I wanted a relationship with him, I needed to reach out. And so I think his method of doing it and the way he conveyed it, I was probably too immature to understand that. But having grown older, I totally understand what his message was, that there were barriers for him, my mother being that barrier. But if I wanted a relationship with him, that was something that I had to foster. So got it.
You mentioned your mom had 12 siblings.
Yep.
Were any of those men? Did you have like a strong man role model at the time, or was it your brother essentially that?
My mother had 5 brothers, so I come from a family of strong women, but my grandfather was a good role model. I had a cousin who just recently passed. He was a good role model. So a lot of the male figures were like either cousins or uncles who were there, supporting you, football games, basketball games, kind of filling that void. We got together collectively as a family throughout the year. And so we come from Mississippi, so like chopping wood and just that hard work thing, seeing my uncles and stuff do it. Yeah, that was enough of a role model. Like I think sometimes we overemphasize the need for a male, like definitely important in the family, but there are examples where strong men have come out from a family that didn't have a male role model. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I do think that it's a good touch point to have. But yeah, no, a lot of men come from, single parent households, and that single parent is the mother oftentimes. So not trying to, downplay that by any means.
So the one thing that she couldn't teach me is how to be a man, because she isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff like shaving,
Yeah.
That's just different.
Right. She can show you how to shave your legs.
Yeah. It's a different kind of shave, man. It's a different kind of shave.
Right.
But yeah, no. So I lucked out. I had a stepfather who stepped up and raised me like his own. So I wasn't missing a male role model in my life, but it would have been nice to have known my dad a little bit better before he passed.
Yeah, I think in our family, and I just witnessed it here over the weekend, I think we filled all that void with love.
Yeah.
Right. So all the voids in our family that we had, we, whether loving on each other, that's how we overcame a lot of the different family issues that every family has, right? But I think we were able to just love on one another and see each other through it. So,
but it takes a village,
it
right?
does.
Like it takes more than just the immediate family to raise children in a community. It does take the community. There are lessons that are being taught when the parents aren't around by friends and within the neighborhood, both good and bad, right?
Right.
When you were talking about kind of growing up and, you had a very strong female role model in your mother, and you had some strong men around you as well. What would you say was the toughest challenge that you faced in your adolescence first and then as an adult?
I think the relationship with my dad was the toughest, right? Because I saw the emotions that my mother exerted from her interactions with him. And so just as a young child, I'm just assuming that he's done something to hurt her.
Mm.
And so that was just a tough thing for me to overcome, for me to forgive him for something that he never did. It was really me reacting to my mother's emotions on wherever she was at that point in time in her life. And so I think growing up as an adolescent, there was like a 5 or 6 year period when I didn't talk to my dad, not because he had done something to me, but because he had made my mom upset. And so I had to learn to separate her emotions from how I felt towards him because he hadn't done anything to me. So that was probably one like the toughest thing for me to overcome. Yeah.
Mm. And as an adult?
So I do have an older son, and I think the toughest thing for me to overcome was something very similar. Like his mother and I didn't agree, and so she kind of put a wedge between us, and so which is fine. But to allow him to go and be with his mother and me love him from afar, I think that's been very challenging. But I felt like his mother loved him so much that this was the best thing because her aggression or frustration with me is because she loved him so much. And so I can love him from afar because that's something no one can take from me. But yeah, I think as an adult, watching my son go off and not interact with him over the years, I've learned to reflect on my own personal experience, but also learned that I still can love him with all my heart and all my might. It just happened to be from afar.
I mean, there are a lot of people who would look at that, right, and then go, well, you're just absent, right? What do you say to people who aren't in the situation, who don't know the intimate details about something like that?
I know it's not me because I have 3 other children who thinks the world of me. Yeah. And I would ask them for them to survey the community and see if they have any ill will or anything poor to say about me as a father. Yeah. And so me understanding that and knowing that this is a one-off, it doesn't define me who I am as a person or who I am as a father. Yeah.
I'm in a similar situation. I think we've talked about this previously.
We have.
But where I feel like I've done a lot of reaching out and it's kind of been stiff-armed or I've been kind of gatekeeped. I've gotten to a point where I was stressing out about it all the time. And you just kind of get to a point where you're like, you know what? Like, it's not good for me to keep bumping up against this wall just to do it, especially when I don't really have any power here. Because I could go to court, right? But then my son would just hate me, If I was like, oh, I'm not getting my visitation, whatever it may be, and maybe I'd get my son, but then he would hate me for taking him away from his mother because they're really close.
Right.
So yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I do struggle with that dynamic though when it comes to how people look at me. Right. Which is why I asked you the question.
Right.
Is, people are like, oh, well, you're just not there. And it's very easy to be painted that way when you have someone who is affirming that narrative, right? Where you go, oh, he's just absent. He's just not there. He's not trying. But they didn't see all the times that you've called, that you've tried to contact and, oh, no, they're busy, or nope, sorry, can't talk to you right now. Or 10 days later, you'll get a reply. They don't see that. In your case, you have other children you can just point at and go, look at that, but for the people who don't necessarily have that, what would your advice be?
Um, I would say find something that you can lean on. So there were two things that allowed me to move forward. So my son's mother and I were going just like court battles and stuff, and I read an article where a similar situation was happening, like in New York, between a male and a female and the child, and they were going back and forth into court battle. And this is what allowed me to move forward. I read the article where the mother jumped off the building with the baby in her hands. And that's why I came to the realization that I love my son enough to let him go, to not put him in a situation where I doubted it would get that extreme.
Yeah.
But we as parents had got beyond seeing each other as humans, and we had allowed the litigation to build up a bigger wall, right? And so that article allowed me to release and let go. And then in the Bible, there talks about, well, Abraham had two sons. They talked about Ishmael and Isaac, right?
Mm.
And so in Isaac, you don't hear about Ishmael anymore. He goes off, and they focus on Isaac. But my assumption is that because of whatever the situation may be, Ishmael missed out on the inheritance that it would have come had he stayed with his father, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of gave me some more relief that someone else of greater magnitude had gone through the same situation where they had to love their child from afar. And if Abraham could do it, if God brought him through it, then I know God could do the same for me.
I think that's awesome advice.
Yeah.
You mentioned religion. Would you consider yourself a man of God?
Yep.
How does that inform your life and decisions?
It does a lot. Like, I think the Bible as a whole, if you just read it, it's just a good self-help book. Like, I don't try to go out and influence people to be believers in Christianity. That's something that's my faith that I believe in.
Yeah.
But I think if you just read the Bible at face value and kind of walked in some of those ways, it'll keep you out of a lot of trouble. It won't keep you out of all trouble, but it'll keep you out of most trouble. And I think that's kind of for all religions. You can have extremists, but if you look at religion, most of them, like 99% of them are good.
Yeah.
And so I've chosen Christianity to be my religion that I choose to walk and guide myself through. And it's definitely helped me, again, something for me to lean on, whether it be fictitious to someone else or make believe, but it's a story that I can hang my hat on when I'm in a time of trouble.
Yeah, I really like how you frame that, because I really think that there are lessons in the Bible, things that help and inform, not necessarily the right way to live, but a good way to live.
I think for me, the turning point is I went to Afghanistan, and I saw the nomadic people on the mountains, and I came to the realization that religion wasn't about the brick and mortar. Because if you read the Bible, they were nomadic people. They didn't go to a building. They really worship amongst themselves as a family. And so when I got that realization, it was key for me that in my family to make sure that I'm try to be that spiritual leader of that stone, and not necessarily focus on a congregation. I don't mind going to a congregation, but I know that religion is based upon the family, right?
I think that the difference, and I think that this could exist in church, but I think that the difference is that when you see someone as family, you're invested in them differently, right? Like if you're my family, I see you doing something wrong, I go, man, I gotta stop that, right? Because I'm invested in you as a member of my tribe. And I think that, at least in my experience, and I think this is something that kind of turned me away from organized religion, is what I've seen people do is mostly gossip. They'll see that thing and they'll go, ooh, and then they'll talk about it instead of reaching out to the person and seeing how they can help.
But do they know you is the question.
Yeah, and that's
because you only in service maybe an hour and a half once a week.
Yeah.
So do they know you well enough to say something to you?
To be invested. Yeah. No, it's a very good question. What is a difficult conversation that we as a community should be having that we are not having? And where do you think that conversation should start?
I think we should move past racism. I think that's a difficult conversation because we've harbored so much hate and from over the years that we've passed down to people who didn't experience those things, and just start having the conversation that there are just bad people with bad ideas and look past their skin color and stop grouping everyone based on their skin color. I had a conversation about how certain entertainers let the culture down. And I'm like, but why are we giving this person, because of his or her skin color, so much power to represent a group of individuals? And so I would like to see the hard conversation to move away from race and move towards nationalism, that I am an American. And it just so happened that my color makes up 13% of the population, but I should have the same rights and abilities as every other American, because I know there are other Americans who may not be my same skin tone that have a different economic background who can't do some of the things that I can do.
Counterpoint, right? I was just looking at some images of when they desegregated school, and realized that some of those people are still alive. My concern is that you look at that and you go, okay, now this person is the head of a company, a CEO, whatever. You don't really know what biases that person may have. So, while I think that what you're talking about is very aspirational, right? Which is like, I think most people would agree with it. You go, hey, let's move past racism. Like, I'm like, yes, let's do it. I would love for people to look at me and say, he's an American, and that's it. I think that everyone wants that deep down inside. The problem is that there are some people within that group of people. I say everyone. Most of us want that. But there are some people within that group, within our tribe as Americans, our national tribe, that look at you and me and they go, they're stupid monkeys and they'll never be anything but that. And for that reason, right, there may be a ceiling for you that you don't understand why you can't get through. So how do you get past needing to have some level of consideration for those things and moving in the direction that I think would be best for our country and maybe even for the world as a whole?
So you have to look at it that we have opportunities before us because of desegregation and other things that gives us access that we probably would not have had. And how do we leverage that to our benefit? I have a right to work anybody I choose to work for. And if someone puts a ceiling in front of me, I can make a decision not to work for that company anymore. Sometimes I think we beat our head trying to break through the glass instead of just going around the glass or finding another somewhere to go, trying to make a point that, no, you have to recognize my talents. I think most CEOs, I think everyone has bias, and it's nothing we can do to change how people think. But if a CEO of a company wants to be successful, they know that they have to recruit talent. I think we saw that in sports during desegregation, right? Talent is what made them go out and get black athletes to come to their college, not because of law, but they wanted to win. I think we see that in most entertainers, right? Like, for instance, there are some horrible entertainers who make a lot of money, but because of their skin tone and their ability to reach the masses, they want to win, right? And so I don't think we can do anything to change anyone's mindset, but we live in a society now that if you don't like it, you can make a way. I think sometimes we put some barriers that, oh, I just can't move to Arizona. True, you just can't move to Arizona, but you can start to save and to give yourself a better way out if where you are you don't like.
I don't disagree with most of that. When you say that you can save, that's assuming, right, that you're getting paid more than what your expenses are. And you can say, well, you could just live less, right? Just live a little more under where you're at, right? But that also assumes that you're not barely scraping by. So when you get to middle class, upper class kind of jobs, pay, yeah, you can do that. When you're working at Walmart and you have 2 or 3 jobs just to get by, I think that's much harder to do. To just, hey, let me get another job when I know that there are tons of other people fighting for those jobs, fighting for those hours. And I have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by in the first place. How do I live under where I am?
But that's not a racial disparity. That's an economic disparity.
I agree with that.
And so I believe that now you're talking about something different. You're talking about how do we close the economic gap? But that's outside of my race, because there are other cultures who deal with the same thing of working multiple jobs.
I will agree that it is an economic thing.
Yep.
But when you look at who occupies the lower economic tier, you will see a lot of minorities in there. You will also see some non-minorities in there as well, just to be fair. But when you look at percentage-wise, how many people versus the per capita, there is an overwhelming majority of minorities who live in that section of society.
Men lie, women lie, numbers do too.
You can't do that. Look, if you're just going to go, the numbers aren't real, then there's no basis of a conversation. But
correct. But when you look at it like that, I'm always going to have blacks only make up 13% of the population.
Okay.
And so if I have 100 non-blacks and I put 3 in there and we all go to jail, per capita, I'm going to have more blacks in jail. So that's how the number thing is, because if you just go with straight numbers, there have to be more non-black people in those positions than there are blacks. Just on a numbers thing.
Okay, well, you're talking about, jail, right?
Even if we're talking about economic disparity, I would have to assume that there are more non-black people on welfare in poverty than there are blacks, because they outnumber us.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. But if you look at the per capita numbers, which any non-minority would tell you to look at,
right,
there is more of us in that pot than there are non-minorities.
Correct.
When you look at prison, right, like people who've gone to jail, 1 in every 3 black people will go to prison. Like that's the number.
Right.
So I look at that and I go, there are lots of reasons why we occupy that space, and some of them are related to our skin tone. So while I agree that it's an economic issue, I think it is informed by an underlying racial issue. When we're having the conversation, and I want to emphasize here, I don't disagree with you. Right? Like, man, if we could get to a place where I just got to exist as an American, that would be the dream, man. Like, that would be the dream. I just don't think that it is our reality right now. I don't know if it's even going to be our reality. It might be our kids. You know what I mean? Our kids are definitely way better at this, and they don't have a lot of the trauma associated with growing up. I know that you have stories, probably, right? Like, I have stories.
Right.
But my son doesn't have any stories.
And we shouldn't pass our stories along down to them.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right.
Like, I don't want them to inherit
my pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe in doing so, we push things a little bit further in that direction, because ultimately it's the goal. We do need to get past it.
We do. I think, and everyone doesn't have the same opportunity. So let me lead with that statement. But I think as a culture, we don't leverage the resources that are available to us. Like, knowledge is key. The Bible says wisdom is more worth than rubies and gold.
Mm-hmm.
And what I take from that is that as long as I'm knowledgeable, I can always make money. When I stop learning or when I stop seeking knowledge is when I find myself in a rut.
I would agree with that, right? The question I would send back your way
Right.
is, how do you know what you don't know to know?
You gotta seek knowledge, right? Like,
Yeah.
you gotta seek it. It's nothing that's gonna fall in your lap. Like,
Yeah.
you have to go out and find ways and seek information and seek knowledge, share information, share knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Be willing to receive information. I think
That's a big one.
Yeah,
That's a big
I
one.
think some people aren't ready to receive information,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've talked to family members and they're like, "Oh, you have it easy," but you're not willing for me to tell you how you think I had it easy by receiving the information that I'm trying to give to you, right? I think you and I've had several conversations about finances and things, like just little things that if people would receive those pieces of nugget could potentially help them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The seeking the knowledge part, yeah, 100%. I do believe that you're going to have some people who are going to say, hey, well, even the school that I go to or whatever else, like, they're not teaching the stuff that other school is teaching. And in some ways, reminiscent of the separation, like if you look at the private school, public school separation, and they said that we've gotten rid of segregation, but like to some extent, it's not segregation on the basis of skin tone.
Money.
It's segregation economically.
Right.
Yeah. So what my kids are learning over here is a completely different education than what you're getting over there. My kids are streamlined into Ivy League schools because I can put them into a private school. Where your public school kids are fighting for the couple of slots that they open up for them.
But I think we can circumvent that. There are resources out there, and I even tell my kids, stop watching YouTube just for stupid videos. There are educational things on YouTube that can fill the gaps.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm teaching myself how to cut hair by watching YouTube videos.
Nice.
But I think there are opportunities out there to grow if you seek the information. China uses TikTok way different than we do here in the U.S., right? We use TikTok to do content videos. They use TikTok for educational situations. And I'm not a advocate for China. I'm just saying that the resources at our fingertips in the information age kind of makes it very difficult for you not to find the information that you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that YouTube and its media, the way that it projects media, is the new book.
Can be.
Right? Like 100% it can be, right?
Right.
But I don't know, because even the stuff that's not educational is still entertaining, right? And to be fair, you had some books that were just there to entertain. They weren't there to teach you anything.
Right.
So I do think that YouTube is the new book. I think that you're going to see, and you're probably seeing this in your family. I know with my son, getting him to read a book, he's constantly on his iPad.
Right.
So I think that there are ways to embrace that and just point them in the right direction content-wise, and just accept that this medium is going to be the medium that they're going to use to learn.
It's their library, right? It's their Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah.
While you were discussing your point, I thought about The Fifth Element, when she kind of basically for 2 days just watched the videos on the thing, right? And how she just gained so much knowledge that way. And I think that YouTube, again, with the right boundaries, we can vector our kids to find more educational videos, to fill some of those voids. You're going to always have economic disparity. That's something that our capitalist society will forever have, unless we change the way that we govern. But in a free market, you're going to have a economic disparity.
I don't think that economic disparity is necessarily a bad thing. Like, so you said a hot take. I got a hot take.
Right.
I don't think economic disparity is necessarily a bad thing. I do think that no one should be starving, right? Like that's kind of where I draw the line. We live in a society, we live in a world where really there's no excuse for that. There is a little bit when it comes to getting food to other countries, because you have to figure out the transportation piece, how you're gonna solve that. Much easier to do internal to a country, but our technology at this point, I go, come on, man. Like, you can have gardens inside of what are those containers? Those
Connex boxes.
Yeah, Connex boxes. You can have gardens in those things. I go, dude, you can have a garden anywhere. So when it comes to that, I go, hey, instead of all of these other programs that we're doing, if you just solve people's, hey, I don't know where I'm going to eat, I don't know where that next meal is going to come from, you'd have a huge drop in crime. You'd have an increase in productivity. People would be more creative because they'd have more time to be creative. So I think economic disparity is a good thing. It rewards effort, right? To see that, oh, if I put in some effort, I can get there. But I do think that there's a bottom to that. And that's where it is for me is, hey, no one should be wondering how they're going to feed themselves.
And so I have a good discussion with my cousin who's also a social worker. He teaches like social work 101. It's at a university up in Tacoma. And we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you hit the nail on the head. In order for you to move up, you have to have an ability to sustain food, water, and shelter on your own. For programs who are constantly giving people food, water, and shelter, that person never gets off step one. They never can get higher than step one because they can't find food, water, and shelter on their own. They're relying on an individual and on an organization. And I think if we want to help people, we have to teach them how do I go out and acquire food, water, and shelter? And once they know those things are secure, now we can get them to the next level on the ladder. But totally agree that helping them sustain food, they don't have to worry about where they're going their next meal. They can focus on some other things.
Yeah. And to be clear, right? Like, I do not mean that we should be solving their problems with social programs, right? I don't mean that. But I do think that one aspect is something that kids going to school shouldn't be worried about. Hey, how am I going to eat? And the school food programs, that's great. That solves one meal of the day.
Maybe two.
Right? Maybe two.
Maybe two.
Right? But I think that's something that no American at this point should have to worry about. I have another philosophy. I want to know what your thoughts are on this specifically. We're kind of going on tangents, but it's fine.
All good. Yep.
So I thought about this. What's your thoughts on a universal basic income? Because I think I have a way to do this.
UBI?
Yeah.
No. No.
Hear me out.
Okay.
Hear me out. Okay. This sounds like it's a socialism idea. It's actually a capitalistic idea. Since like the 1970s, we've been giving businesses tax cuts.
Right.
The reason has been that they're the job creators. Right?
Right.
So the American people go, hey, we will take on the burden of paying for what our country needs us to pay for while you don't pay because you're the job creator. We're investing in you as the job creators. Fast forward, now you're automating. I go, hey, you've enjoyed these tax breaks for the last 60 years. I've been investing in you. My parents have been investing in you. My grandparents have been investing in you this entire time. We deserve a return on our investment if you're not going to continue to be a job creator at the, semi same rate that you've been being a job creator. That is not to remove the incentive of automation, right? So you don't want to tax them, right? An automation tax is what I'm thinking in my head. You don't want to tax them so much that it removes the incentive of automation, but then you take that money and you go, okay, cool. And now you send it out as universal basic income. Everybody gets it. Why? Because everybody's been investing in it, right? So now you put that back in the pockets of American people. You solved your food problem, or the food prices go up, right? Capitalism,
Right.
But if you manage that well, you could solve the food problem. So I will acknowledge that capitalism looks at that and goes, got some juicy meat for me.
The Coke just went up 50 cents.
Yeah, 100%, right? So I will acknowledge that the market does respond to things like that. However, I think that what you do now is you go, okay, everybody gets that. Okay. Now, if you want to just use that for food or whatever, you're retired, let's say, whatever. Okay, cool. Good. You got that money coming for you. Okay. If you want to go on and be a doctor, yeah, you'll make more money because you're going to make whatever your universal basic income is plus whatever your pay is for doing this other job. So you still get your economic disparity, which I think is an important thing to have because you need a reward for effort. Thoughts?
I think you're just doing it in reverse. It's called Social Security. You're just doing it in reverse.
So yes, but the problem with Social Security is Social Security relies on younger people paying into it. And if we're not having more kids than the number of people who currently exist, right? So if me and my wife are not having kids,
right?
Like I've hurt Social Security, right?
By one person, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I look at it and I go, that system is reliant on this. This system isn't reliant on that.
Where does the money come from?
The money comes, it comes from the...
So increased taxes? So that's what I'm saying. Like
it's an increase on business tax, specifically targeted towards automation.
Okay.
Basically, the removal of jobs.
But understood. And so I would push back on that just a little bit because I don't think jobs are removed. I think they are just repurposed.
Interesting.
If you go look at farming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if I get this tractor, they're going to remove all the labor, but you need someone to fix the tractors, need someone to build the tractors. Mm-hmm. So you may have removed 10 people from the field, but you put them in a factory.
I think it depends on where you are in that chain, right? So let me give you an example. Prior to cars, horses were everywhere. Everyone had horses, right? Now you had a guy who would take your coaches, right? And that was a job, right? You had someone who took care of the horses and that was a job. Okay, you make cars. You just created new jobs for the people who were doing those things. But you didn't create new jobs for the horses, right? Now, I bring that up because what I'm talking about is at some point, we're going to be the horses. And the thing that's going to replace our work is a computer or a robot or something else. And that's where we're going. The difference with a horse is that it was very good at doing non-complex transportation, right? At a variable speed, but a slower speed. Well, when you brought a car, now you put a human in charge of it. You have this machine that's able to do the horse's job at a more efficient rate, do more complex functions. But people assume that we will not be in the position of the horse. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think that If you fast forward 50 years, there's going to be a lot of human jobs that have been replaced with machines, and the next person in the loop is another machine. So the person behind the wheel it's just a different code to manage that code. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the skill set will change. So I think you're going to need more people who are able to program and understand artificial intelligence. I think you see that demand going through the roof, no different than when you saw mechanical engineers when the industrial age was booming, right? Building factories and building assembly lines. I think there are just going to be some jobs that can't be replaced, like funeral homes, doctors, dentists. And so I think the jobs will shift. Do I believe that robots one day probably can build a house? To a degree. Right?
It's already happening.
Yeah, to a degree. But someone or something has to teach that computer to build it and to quality control it and to do all those things. And so I believe, yes, someday, 100 years from now, the machines will be teaching the machines, but there still will be some human in the loop that will require some human intervention.
I think we might have to agree to disagree on this.
Yeah. I mean, we might be the Matrix one day, right? We'll see. But I think in the near future, I think because we can see that where the job market is shifting, we need to educate ourselves and educate our kids to do so. I think the Obama administration, not to get political, I think they did an awesome job of providing resources to the baby boomers to go back and re-educate themselves or retool themselves because they were living longer. They were living past their retirement. And so they made community college a lot more affordable for the working adult. And I think those type of policies and stuff will probably need to be put in place as we see jobs move away from human interaction to machine interaction. There got to be resources to allow people living in that time to recertify, retool themselves, or their jobs will go away.
Back to your original point.
Yep.
Racism. We need to move on. We need to get past it.
Yep.
Be more clear about your intent there.
Stop letting it be a division. Stop making it a black and white thing and just make it a human thing, because I think there are going to be edge cases for everything, right? But I think inside the bell curve, you just have hardworking Americans who want to get through life and they don't see color per se, right? I think they have biases of their upbringing. They're going to clutch their purse, but I lock my doors too when I see somebody sketchy, regardless of race. And so, and also not blaming race when you don't get something, when you assume it should go your way, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming there are other people who apply for that job who didn't get the job, who may have been of the same race.
Yeah.
And so just moving past it, looking at the opportunities that we have. You and I have spoken, like there are some people out there in great positions regardless of race because they made good decisions, right? Everyone isn't designed to be millionaires.
Yeah.
Right?
No, facts. But I do think it's important to highlight that there are some times that someone is not picked for a thing because of that thing. I think that to your point, I don't know what that thought serves though. Right? What does it do for you? Right. So when you stop thinking of yourself as powerless, you start to truly see how much power you have. And that is the power to take your resources elsewhere, i.e. you can buy different products. Okay. Oh, you don't like black people? Okay. I will take my money elsewhere. Right. Oh, you don't want to promote me? You don't appreciate my effort? Okay. I will take my hard work, my ethic, my ingenuity, my creativity elsewhere. And there's power in that. And I think that serves you better than going, I didn't get this because of this thing, because I'm black.
Right. And I would like the minorities to understand the power that they hold in the democratic government. We are the kingmakers.
Yeah.
In other societies around the world, the minorities really have the most say because their vote is the one that they are most coveted because they make the decision on who's going to be the king.
Yeah. It tips the hat.
It tips, and us being the minority, we can tip the scale, right? You know what I mean? So if something, as you stated, you don't want to cater to this type of person, then we'll just take our money and our dollars elsewhere to someone who will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can teach our society and our culture that we really are powerful and not powerless because we are the kingmakers, they need our 13% to sway the democratic process.
Yeah. But isn't that only true if we are somewhat united, right? Because, for example, within this election, I'm not seeing that kind of unity. I'm not seeing a clear cut like, yeah, minorities are voting this way.
Because we've been pigeonholed that if you don't vote a certain way, you're not black, right? You kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're allowing racism to divide us even more instead of us just embracing, okay, I'm a minority, American, and don't let either side play on the race card about they're doing more for one race. Like just come together as a culture.
Yeah.
Right? Like color of my skin doesn't matter. This culture is what I want you to address this culture, right?
Yeah.
But there's the two sides are playing the race card and have us racially divided amongst ourselves, right? You're not black if you don't vote a certain way. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. I think that largely you need to look at what the person's actual policies are, what their track record is. Because, I had someone who used to tell me this, but the best indication of future behavior is past behavior, right? So look at what their track record is and then make a decision based off of that, because that's largely what they care about. I'm kind of sick of the process of no one caring about certain groups of people, and then a year out from when they come up for election, all of a sudden, oh man, let me make sure I pass this bill so that I can reference that in my campaign that I've been doing this thing for these people.
Or let me go hand out some turkeys, right?
Yeah.
Let me show up for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah.
In the community when I'm absent, the other 90% of the time.
Yeah.
But again, that's back to each individual seeking their own truth.
Yeah.
And stop relying on the community truth and going and find out, hey, what issues are right for my household or my well-being, and not voting the party line. And that requires some courage to do that.
How do you feel about money in politics? The trend tends to be the person who spends the most money gets elected.
I'm okay with that. Raise the most money, and your chances of winning go through the roof.
Yeah, but in order to raise the most money, I may have to become beholden to this company or this thing.
That's a true statement. And I believe a lot of our politicians and a lot of our democratic process, it does fall back to big business. But that's what you get when you have a capitalistic society. But that's what we all want, though. I mean, we want what we want when we want it.
Do we all want that?
I think most want those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People want the security of socialism, but the benefits of capitalism.
Agree.
Right?
I totally agree.
Is there a way to meet in the middle?
I think that's on an individual basis. Because I definitely purchase and acquire more than I need. And so I think that's just on the individual level, people have to make that determination on where's that fine line, right? Because again, I think if you have the resources, sometimes we spend them just because we have them, not because it's something that we need. Like I like shoes. I have way more than a pair of shoes than I can wear at one time. But I want variety for whatever the reason may be, right? But I got some J's. But, when you look, like people have two cars, you only can drive one at a time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think that's just on an individual basis. You have to find out what do you feel is the right place for you to be between that social construct and then that capitalistic mindset.
I'm struggling with this a bit.
Okay.
So I've always had the philosophy that capitalism doesn't work without a little socialism, and socialism doesn't work without capitalism. That you actually need both.
Yes.
Because one is about innovation and pushing society forward, letting certain things die so that other things can grow, right? And socialism is focused more on the human element, right? I talk about this in a different podcast, but if you had somebody who was a single mom, husband passes away suddenly, and I go, ooh, and she's like, I haven't worked in the last 15 years, right? The human side of me goes, we got to help her get on her feet, right? That's not, we got to help her for the rest of her life, but we need to help her get back on her feet. The human part of me says that, right? The capitalistic mindset would look at that situation and go, well, she shouldn't have ended up in that situation. Right? Like, let it die.
Right.
So for me, in a society where humans exist, I feel like you have to have both. And I think what we really are debating when it comes to, having two people across from each other going, we should be doing this, we should be doing this. I think what we're really debating is what those levels should be, right? How far one should extend and how far the other should extend, not whether both should exist.
I totally agree. I think we need some social programs, right? My wife is a social worker, so I totally support social programs because there are people, as you just mentioned, given that example, who need the community's help to get to a certain point. And it is, when does that help stop?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we struggle with, right? I think that's where we lack ways to audit, ways to track. When does that help stop?
Yeah.
Because you do have people who have leaned on these social programs and have stopped. Their capitalistic mindset no longer exists, or they're not innovative. Have no ingenuity, have no gumption. They're just okay with receiving help from the community and not giving back. And so I agree. The debate is like, what level of help do we reach when we're like, okay, I'm no longer giving dollars to this individual. Yeah. But I don't think you can have account for every case, and I think that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very difficult part. Like, because she's 88, should I stop giving her money?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Because you do have people out there with mental incapacitations and stuff like that who need society to care for them to some degree, right?
Yeah. That's a capacity argument.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you just have some people who are just lazy, who have found a way to circumvent the system and lean on it and just
made it a career.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The key is when does the help stop?
When does the help stop?
As I talk with people, in your seat in various locations, because sometimes I'm moving around.
Right.
There are a couple things that kind of just like keep coming up. And while the topics tend to be very unique, right? I'll go from one person to the next. Okay. Right. When it comes to how do we exist with each other, it seems like we come back to the same things. One of those being, hey, I want to help people, but I think that there should be an end to that at some point. And how do we determine what that is? There is a human side of me here, but there's also a business side of me here. And I want them to coexist reasonably with each other. And I find that comforting, actually. I find it comforting that the majority of the people that I talk to all kind of feel the same way. Because to your point about, hey, we need to move in this direction, it lets me know that we're not all that different when it comes to what our thought process is. We all kind of feel the same things. We don't want to be taken advantage of. We want to be kind, but we don't want to be taken advantage of. And I think that to your point, when you go, hey, I think that we need to get to a point where we look at each other through a national lens, right? I would go even further. I would go, it needs to start there, but then we need to get to a global lens where we just go, we're all human, right? And I think that's an underlying element within what you're saying, because America's a melting pot,
Right.
right?
Right.
So really what you're asking for is, hey, just acknowledge me as a human, just like you, same blood pumping through my veins. I just look a little different.
I think it's a hope. You're going to have the naysayers who don't want to change, and that's just a natural occurrence. People dislike change. But I think the thing is that we all know someone who is taking advantage of the system or a person. And so we're hesitant to help because we don't want to be taken advantage of. Because we can, like, I know person X does this to take advantage of either a person or a system. But I do believe that we all really just want the same. You know, if you're married or whatever and have kids, I say those are things that we all can probably agree on. We all feel that people should have clean drinking water, should have food, and should be able to educate their kids and have a place to stay. I think it'll be very difficult for people to disagree on those topics. Now, how do we accomplish that? We may disagree on how do we do those things, but I think we all can agree on like those 4 things that it's hard for us to disagree on. And that's always a good conversation starter. Like, you want to educate your kids, you want clean drinking water, you want some good food, and you want a place to call shelter and a home. And then how do you provide is where we start to diverge on whether it should be a social construct or a capitalistic type of situation.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Very difficult for people like, no, I want my kids to be educated. No, you know what I mean? Like,
I think people get very protective once you start talking about kids, right? Like, at our core, we want our kids to have opportunities, right? I want my kids to have as much opportunity as your kids, right?
I want my kids to have more opportunity than your children. I'm just being honest. I want to give my kids a competitive advantage.
Yeah, well.
And I'm being, in the dog-eat-dog world, I'm just being honest. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that I want my kids to push your kids down or anything, but, you know, you want to give your kids the best that you can, right?
Yeah, you want to give them as much of an advantage as you can. That largely comes from how you raise them.
Correct.
Right? But when it comes to opportunity, meaning I want them to have the same educational opportunities, I want, if their effort doesn't get them to the next step, on them, right? But that's where the parenting part comes in, right? But I think that this is just me personally, I won't speak for you, but I want my kids to have as much opportunity as your kids have, right? I think that's a universally shared idea. When it comes to advantages, I want to give my kids the best advantages that I can by instilling these characteristics, these traits in them. But even me, I want them to compete equally with your kids.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And if your kids are better, they're just better.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but I want the opportunities to be equal.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I want my children to have an equal opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, if I can help them get an advantage of, like, my kids will never be LeBron James. He just came out the womb just physically gifted that no one else will ever do, right? But
it's like Michael Phelps, right?
Yeah, just
designed
for that, right? Yeah. But I want my kids to have an opportunity to swim if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah.
Right. They may not be Michael Phelps, but if they think swimming is something that they want to live and love, then I want to give them the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Right.
They should have the access.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the situation that we're in. Everyone doesn't have the same access.
Yeah. And I think that's what people get really fired up about.
Right.
Right. Because it's easier to understand that I don't have the access. Right.
Right.
It shouldn't be, but for some reason, it's easier for me to accept, okay, yep, that's where I am. But it's harder for me to accept that for my kids. right? I look into my future kids, whatever, you know, I look at it and I go, no, I want them to have every opportunity that these other kids are having. And if they don't get it, I'm upset.
But you have to put in the work, though. You have to lay that foundation to open those doors.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dude, like, parenting is a job.
It doesn't stop.
Right?
Right.
Like, but I think some people don't look at it that way. They don't look at it as the responsibility that you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, where you go, yeah, the hardest thing, being a parent, right? Like, that right there is the level of responsibility that everyone should look at it with. And not just because of, you know, I want my kids to do the best, but I mean, we should all be invested that way. They're the future of our community, right? So why would I not want them to have the best opportunity? Why would I not want them to be the best that they could be? That's all things that we need to encourage. And it's not just your job, to take this back to the conversation as well, but it's not just your job. It's all of our jobs.
It's all of our jobs.
Right?
Right.
Like, so when I was saying earlier, it takes a village, that's what I mean, right? I need to see your kid who has a mechanical interest, right? And let's say I'm a mechanic and I go, hey man, you mind if I teach him some things? Right? And you'd be like, sure.
But I have to be a parent that's receptive to allow you to teach my children.
100%.
A lot of parents don't want people teaching their kids, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? But I have to be allowing, hey man, I'm going to let you go and learn from this because I can't teach you how to do this function.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge that as a parent, I'm limited. But if I know someone, let me make sure I give you access to that individual.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of goes back to like, who do you have access to help your kids, right?
One thing I've been reflecting on with children specifically, and you can tell me what you think about this, is in my mind, I think I've always had this idea like my kids are going to do this thing and they're going to be like this. They're going to have scientific minds. They're going to be creative. They're going to do all these things, right? But in reality, they may be none of those things. They may have a very specific interest in something that I don't understand. And as I've kind of become an adult and I've seen people do things that I looked at that I was like, that's not something you can be successful at, you know? An artist, okay, you're going to be a starving artist. And then seeing that person go on to being like, you know, a well-known artist where, you know, their stuff is in galleries, they're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do things. And it's like, ooh, okay, maybe I misread that,
right?
You know, gaming even, right? Like I'm seeing people make a lot of money playing video games,
or even streaming them playing video games.
100%. And if you would have asked me 15 years ago if that was something that could be a job, like a job that you could do for any length of time, I'd be like, no. Like you're wasting your time. So I think it's important to feed their desires when it comes to to feed their interests. Because that interest may lead to another interest and another interest and another interest. And if you dismiss it, what you could end up doing is snuffing out that little bit of spark that was starting to grasp at knowledge, curiosity. And so now it's just something that they do behind your back, and it never goes any further because it's something that they got to keep hidden, and they do in small little bite-sized pieces.
Right. I think first is, though, as a parent, I have to be cautious of defining what success means for my children. My level of success may not be what their level of success is. And so I think it's important for me to teach them how to provide their basic needs, food, water, and shelter without any intervention. And if they can do that, then they can be a painter, gamer, whatever the case may be, as long as they're not coming to mom and dad for me to keep their lights on.
Yeah.
And so I definitely will pour my all into whatever their interest may be, try not to snuff them, but I think I can't project what I feel is success, right? Because
Yeah.
I've owned a home doesn't mean that my kids have to own a home. If they want to live in an apartment, a one-room shack, in their car, whatever that they choose to do, as long as they're doing it safely and don't need anyone to help them intervene, I might have to eat them. Like, that's not how I would choose to live. But if they are living in happy with that, I'm okay with that. I've seen a lot of families fall apart because parents have projected their level of success onto their kids.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna try my best not to do that with my children.
I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a clip of Dave Chappelle talking about a similar conversation he had with his dad. So he wanted to be a comedian. His dad's like, "Are you sure, man? Right? Are you sure you want to be a comedian? They don't make a lot of money. You may not make it, right? A lot of people try, they don't make it." And he goes, "Well, that depends on what you consider making it, Dad, right?" And he was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, if I can make a teacher's salary," his dad was a teacher, "on doing comedy, then I would consider that success." And his dad goes, "Well, you know what? If you keep that mentality, I think you'll be all right." And for me, that's it, man. That's the whole thing.
Right.
Is success is measured in very different levels. And if they're doing what they love, I would consider that a success. Me personally, I've done lots of jobs. I haven't loved all of them. But I think being able to do something that you love, that you're passionate about, is a rare thing. And I think that there's some people who go their entire lives without ever finding out what that thing is.
Totally agree. I think people find themselves working to provide their basic needs, and which is totally fine, right? I think you got to do what you have to do. But I am envious of people who find something that they love and make a lot of money doing it, right? Or just find something that they love and okay with living again, what would not necessarily be my level of success, but they found happiness teaching, garbage truck driver, whatever it may be, and they're able to sustain happiness and okay with that. And I'm on board with that. Like everyone doesn't have to have the 4-bedroom, 3-car garage type of home to be quote unquote called successful. I think we've projected what we think success looks like onto as an absolute, and not looking at those individuals who may have overcome a reading disability or some type of physical disability and they're able to care for themselves. We don't celebrate those successes, but we're quick to pat somebody on the back because they just went and bought a $1.5 million house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I agree with the example you gave about Dave Chappelle. We have to just meet people where they are with their successes and celebrate them wherever they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your personal definition of success?
Be able to take care of myself and my wife now, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. If I can do that successfully from the time we got married until the time we die, then I'm able to take care of us holistically in the good times and bad times. That's success. Not have to miss a meal, not have to worry about medicine, not have to do those things. If I can do that, I think for me that's success. I want to make sure that I live up to my portion of the covenant I have with my wife to care for her through sickness and in health. So that for me, that would be success.
I love that.
Yep.
If there was one thing that you could say to the world, that you could put out to the universe and have people receive it, really receive it, what would it be?
To love one another. I think if you are able to love the person the way that you love yourself, we'll be in a whole different ball game, a whole different space. We wouldn't be fighting over socialism, capitalism, whatever the case may be. I think if we learn to love just on a whole nother level, that it is very difficult. It's very difficult, but that would be my message to the world, to learn to love one another and to forgive people. But in order to have forgiveness, you got to have love. Yep.
Well, Chris, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me today.
It's been awesome.
Definitely.
And guys, thanks for joining us.